stay alive and stay agile and adapt to Rajiv's point. One, I would say, we really defined who we stood for and our values very early on. We didn't define them, intentionally for the first 25, 30 years, but 54 years ago in 1970, we did. And I think making sure that you never compromise on that, making sure that that becomes your guiding light, making sure that you attract people who deeply and truly align to what you stand for, I think is incredibly important, right? I really deeply believe that culture matters infinitely more than strategy, and that can really help make or break a company. The second thing I would say is, we were entrepreneurial. We encouraged people to take on big roles young. We were risk-taking. We were not afraid to fail. And we took lots and lots of chances, some of them that worked out, some of them that failed miserably. We got into the finance business in 1996, which was a major disaster. But we weren't afraid to try things, right? And the third thing I would say is a part of that entrepreneurial sort of spirit, we empowered people, and there was great autonomy. So I was joking earlier, right, that, I'm the exec chair of the company. I can get my computer fixed faster than most people. But if I have to convince our CEO to do something that he doesn't want to do, it's going to be a very, very tough job for me, and I can't just dictate that. So there's great empowerment and great autonomy that comes with that empowerment. I think that's really helped the company as well.
Rishad, I was watching an old interview or broadcast where you were speaking, and you said that, I was trying to figure out when you're trying to hire somebody, what should you look for? Should you look for commonality? Should you think whether you can have a drink with that person? And you were advised, none of that. Don't look for commonality. What would be your advice?
No, I was talking to one of my board members, and I was saying this. I was like, when I'm looking for someone, do I like this person? Can I have a drink with in the evening with this person? Can I have a cup of coffee with? And he said, that's the completely wrong way to look for people. You should look for people who are very different than you. They challenge you. They make you uncomfortable at times. But they're highly functional. And that comes from diversity of experiences, right? That comes from diversity of industries you've worked in, roles you've played, gender, ethnicity, sexuality, your life experiences. It just comes from being different. And I realized at one point, many years ago, I had someone in my team where every time I had to review him, I was stressed. I was like, he's going to push me, he's going to ask me difficult questions, et cetera, et cetera. But I found that brought out the best in me. So I'm a big believer in trying to find people and keep people in your team that are very different than you. You don't necessarily have to be friends with people you work with either.
But you have to have people who challenge your thought, right? Great to hear that. Rajiv, to get you in, leadership is not easy. It's lonely at the top, and every leader has a moment of reckoning. And when you talk about companies like Wipro and Bajaj Auto, there could be many such moments. So Rajiv, for you, one point that I always think about was perhaps 98, 99, when Bajaj Auto, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know how many of you remember, 1999 was perhaps the first time that Bajaj Auto first posted a loss in their two-wheeler business. How bad was that for you, Rajiv? Was that your moment of reckoning, or was there something else that's been there hidden in your heart somewhere?
See, first of all, I think it was the financial year 2000 when what had been a very, very successful and profitable company, as you correctly say, lost money on its two-wheeler business for the first time. Fortunately, the three-wheeler business and the spare part business kept us afloat. But before I answer your question, I must make it clear that at that time, it was my father who was in charge of the company, not me. So this problem is not created by me, first of all. But having said that, this was a difficult time. And to put it briefly, if you read the book, The Origin of Brands by Al Ries, you will see a lot of information which effectively conveys this, that it doesn't matter whether you're in software, motorcycles, or any other business, 90 to 95% of all new businesses, new products and services fail. Now that's really quite a lethal statistic. And this is true across the world, across industries. And what Al Ries teaches us is that they fail primarily because most of those products and services were brought out to serve a market and not to create a market, So when you try to serve a market, i.e. to fulfill demand, and that is what most salespeople want to do, you end up being a clone of someone else. As opposed to creating your own market, as opposed to generating demand as against just fulfilling demand, And that is why my marketing guru, Jack Trout, I was very fortunate to know him, taught me that when you say, give your customer what he wants, that's only half the answer. The other half of the answer is give the customer what he wants and what nobody else apparently can or does give him. And that brings us to the whole point about differentiation. You know, the CEO of Coke said, when it comes to real estate, it's about location, location, and location. When it comes to a consumer business, it's about differentiation, differentiation, and differentiation. The problem with differentiation is it is so counterintuitive, you know, to do something that nobody else is apparently doing and hoping that it will succeed. It's a scary thought. So you tend to follow the herd. And to illustrate, I would give you a quick example that Hero Honda brought out the 100cc four-stroke motorcycle in the 80s. Bajaj Auto, remember, it was my father, was 7 years late with the same thing. And we tried to make the better product. The hard lesson you learn is people don't buy better, people buy different. And how do you make different and not better? This is very key to your success.
And that was quite a difficult and tough learning experience, wasn't that for you? Because for a long time in Bajaj Auto's history, you tried to target the 100cc segment where Splendor, ladies and gentlemen, the Splendor motorcycle you see on the streets of India, that was the product that you were challenging, and you felt that was a waste of time.
Actually, it's a great learning, if I may share that experience that, so they had a 100cc motorcycle, we had a 100cc motorcycle. Piyush Bhai here was our partner on that journey on behalf of Ogilvy. And we struggled and we got nowhere with that in India because somebody else was first to market. However, two things happened. In the domestic market, we switched track from a 100cc motorcycle to the Pulsar, which was different because it was not a better mileage motorcycle, it was a sports motorcycle. And that really marked the turnaround of the company's fortunes in the domestic market. Whereas the 100cc motorcycle, we took overseas to export markets at a time when Honda would not permit Hero to export out of India. And what happened in the end? The same 100cc motorcycle in India, Hero outsold us 5:1. The same 100cc motorcycles in all overseas markets, we outsold them 15:1. It's the same management, same brand, same quality, same cost, everything else being same. The fortunes in the marketplace were completely different, only because depending on who was first to market. You know, so that is why in marketing we say it is better to be first than it is to be better. That is very, very important.
Right. Rishad,
I don't know if you know this, by the way.
Yeah.
You know, in 1979, Wipro was considering to diversify, Rajiv. And for some reason, we were considering the two-wheeler business because the view was there was a rising middle-class India and people would buy two-wheelers, or the technology business. And for whatever reason, the decision back then was made to get into the technology business. But I just thought I'd share that because he's talked so much about two-wheelers.
That's fantastic. Rishad, what I also wanted to ask you, when we speak about moments of reckoning, in promoter-driven companies, in family-driven companies, there can always be differences. You know, when you're changing gears, when you're changing the leadership at the top. Were there differences in your thinking on how Wipro should chart out its future? In what ways did you mirror the thoughts of your father? Did he give you any advice when you were taking over as chairman of the company that this is something you must follow? Or at some point you said, no, Dad, I'm going to follow my own path over here?
Yeah. You know, Parikshit, it's interesting, and I say this often, and you know, people can take it for what it's worth, but I deeply believe this, which is I don't think we're a family business, right? I'm the only family member today that works in the company. So there's nobody else that works at Wipro. My father is a non-independent, non-executive director of the company, and that's very important, right? And for the longest time, we've been highly professionalized, right? So we are professionally run. I'm very clear on my role. I'm an exec chair, so I play an important role, but I'm very clear on the differentiation between ownership and management and how my role, to some extent, blurs on that. And that's an important point, just in the ethos and the autonomy and empowerment that I talked about earlier. Look, my father and I are very different in many ways, right? But I think the one thing that he was incredibly gracious about is when he retired in 2019, he truly retired, right? Because you can't have a big personality like that on the back of your shoulders. And what he said to me was, look, I'm always accessible and always there if you need something, but I won't be in your way. And he's a demanding board member and asks difficult questions and all of those kinds of things, but it's not in my space in terms of doing work, and I deeply deeply appreciate that. What have I learned from him? I mean, you know, he's unfazed by success. It's not important to him. It doesn't sort of show up. I think I've learned that. The importance of just being grounded and unfazed by success, because good times come and bad times come, and you can't let them ride you too much. A deep openness to learn and willing to say, I don't know. A willingness to say, I need help. A willingness to sort of learn from any level of the organization, right? Just a deep sort of learning mindset, I think, is what I have picked up with him. The one area I would say I'm different is I would probably say I'm a bit more empathetic with people. I understand more easily, and I'm just, I enjoy people more perhaps than he does. And that's just a DNA thing more than anything else.
Right. So what advice, I'm sure there are many top industry leaders here today who will be heading their companies in a few years from now. What advice would you give someone who's being groomed to be a leader, who may take over some point, or who has the aspirations? Because one thing you always keep hearing is you've got big shoes to fill. Yeah. And you were told that as well.
Yeah. You can't worry too much what other people think. It's exhausting to worry about what everybody else thinks, and everybody's giving you advice. And when you run the race, I think you've got to look to the side to know where people are, but you've got to focus in the front, because the more you focus on the side, the more it slows you down. So I really think you've got to focus and look in front. I really believe that. I would say that's the #1 advice I would give. You know, deeply focus on your own journey. Don't worry too much about what the naysayers say. Don't worry too much about what other people's expectations of you are, because I find those are exhausting, and they drain you and they slow you down, right? The big learning I've had for myself personally, Parikshit, is the best you can do is the best you're capable of. So ultimately, that's all you can do. And so if people have other expectations, you're just going to disappoint them, and there's some who you'll delight. But the best you can do is the best you're capable of, and ultimately the journey of competition is against yourself. It's really not against anybody else.
Right. Rajiv, I'm going to take the liberty of citing something that the former semi-chief M. Damodran had once said. He said he met you at a conference, and you had just taken over as MD, and he told you that you're taking over from your father, the great Rahul Bajaj. You've got big shoes to fill. And ladies and gentlemen, Rajiv Bajaj said, my shoe size is bigger than my father's. Is that true, Rajiv?
See, my father was well known for being very outspoken, you know. And sometimes this used to boomerang on me, because he used to annoy people who used to then vent on me. So I think God felt bad about this, and he made my foot size bigger than my father's, so that I cannot put my foot in my mouth and talk like he used to talk. You know? So that is why my foot size is bigger than my father's.
Okay. You know, what advice, Rajiv, would you give a leader of tomorrow, possibly your son? See,
I'll share with you some thoughts of the polymath Vaclav Smil, because they resonate deeply with me, and since so many people are on their phones, they're obviously not enjoying our session. So if I say something clever now, they will look up from their phones and listen to us. So these are 5 things that Vaclav Smil said, which I tell my people, and maybe through this, my son is also going to listen to it, because otherwise sons don't easily listen to what fathers have to say. You know, so 5 simple thoughts of wisdom, I think. The first thing he said is read widely and with maximum curiosity. You know, for example, people think I'm weird when I say that my motorcycle strategy is defined more by yoga and homeopathy than by anything else. You know, but learning from yoga and homeopathy has taught me how to make a better motorcycle. So keep learning, read widely and with maximum curiosity. The second thing he said is keep reality first and theory last. You know, managers have to be very pragmatic. नहीं तो हम लोग के मीटिंग में तो क्या खाली ऊपर की बातें होती है, तो you have to धरती पे आओ थोड़ा, you know. So be very practical, be very pragmatic, keep reality first and theory last. The third thing he said is leave money and status out of it. Basically pursue excellence in what you do, not because money, value, valuations, market cap, मतलब market में टोपी लगाना, as we call it, and you know, status, fame, name, nahi. Chase excellence, money and fame will chase you. The fourth thing he said is manage your identity. Know who you are and stand there, I won't take his name, but you know the famous story of the businessman who said to himself that because I make good beer, which gives people a high, I can also give them a high by starting an airline. And then you know what happened. So manage your identity. Apni औकात में रहो, अपने पतलून में रहो, as we say. So that's the fourth thing he said, which means focus, keep your focus. And finally, very important, I think, have skin in the game, which means commitment. I mean, if we say today that we are committed to the future, it's because we have skin in the game. We just put out in July the world's first CNG motorcycle. Nobody's done it before, with fantastic benefits in terms of pollution, congestion, running costs for the Aam Aadmi. And we are investing heavily behind our electric scooters and three-wheelers. So, these are the kind of values I would like to believe that all of us at Bajaj, and hopefully my son too one day, will imbibe and exhibit.
Right. You've spoken about building value, something that lasts, something that is pragmatic, and dharti pe raho. That is something very important, an advice that we need to give to startups possibly and leaders of tomorrow. Rishad, as one of the leading software and IT companies in the world, you must be meeting a lot of startups every day. So when somebody gives you a pitch saying that we'll achieve unicorn status in 5 months, or we have a valuation of, say, $5 billion, $6 billion, how do you see those statements?
Look, that's the first red sign in my view, Parikshit. I mean, you've got to focus, as I love what Rajiv said, and you've got to focus ultimately on building businesses that sustain, and then ultimately value will come. You cannot start your journey saying, I want to build a value of X, Y, and Z. That's very turning off. And so that's a first red sign that pops up when people talk about valuation as opposed to building valuable businesses. And I think, frankly, I know there's some venture people in the room. I just find that we've overhyped in our country this whole focus on unicornism. Right? We celebrate that too much. And there are thousands and thousands of other companies that don't make it but serve a need and are successful, but they don't make unicorn valuation, and it doesn't make them non-successful companies.
Rishad, you've evolved as a leader. You've worked on yourself. And I think that's a big advice to people out there, that you have to change, adapt, be vulnerable. I don't know how many of you would know, but Rishad started his career with Bain & Company.
With G, actually.
With G.
Okay.
And you've had tough times. All of us, when we're starting, we want to make those sacrifices. We want to put our health, family, mental health, emotional well-being, everything aside to achieve that one goal. We want to show our leader that we're there for the company and we can be groomed for tomorrow. But we're not doing justice to ourselves. Tell us how you've changed. Of course, you've always stood by your values, integrity. But in the last 5-6 years, what are some of the things that you've prioritized and changed your thinking?
I learned this very early on when I was at Bain, and I had a very young analyst working for me. And we were working on this very intense project for 3 weeks in a row, and he prioritized himself on some elements, and I loved it. It was his father's birthday on a Saturday. We were working 7 days a week for 3 weeks in a row on some private equity project. And he said, look, Rishad, I can't come in this day because it's my father's birthday and it's incredibly important. And I was incredibly frustrated, but I was frustrated not so much because he had said that, but because I wouldn't have said that, right? I would have thought of myself as too much of a slacker, not prioritizing the right things, et cetera, et cetera. And that's frankly continued really to the last 4 or 5 years when I started thinking a little bit more about myself and my own health. And I've just focused a lot on a few different things. I've focused on sleep. I'm very purposeful about sleep. I'm very purposeful about exercise. And I'm very purposeful about eating right? And the eating right thing began really last year, but the sleeping and the exercise began 5 or 6 years ago. And I've been tracking this closely over the last 5 or 6 years. And I just find it has deeply helped my mental health. Just, how I show up. Just my orientation, my positivity, whether I'm happy or not, whether I'm irritable, whether I'm constructive, whether I have a can-do attitude, whether I snap at people, all of those things. And I've really found that it's so important to focus on these things because we're all human, whether you're the MD of a company or whether you're somebody starting from campus, we are all human. And if we're not focusing enough on ourselves, it's going to show up later on. And so at least one thing we're doing at Wipro very intentionally now is talking a lot about mental health, talking a lot about keeping well, providing access to lots of tools and people and systems where people can access that. And it's remarkable how people are using it and appreciating the fact that we're talking about these things, because I think it's incredibly important.
Right. You know, Rishad, one sense that I get from both you and Rajiv is laying out a strategy for the future. I think a lot of us sometimes feel is, what is the role of a leader? Should I be focusing more on marketing? Should I be focusing more on R&D? Getting more investments? Maybe on the finance side? Cost cutting? What should I be really doing? Rajiv, you've often spoken about putting a long-term strategy in place. When you're doing that, how have you defined the role of a leader for yourself and what you need to do for the company?
Parikshit, I like again what I read in another book by Al Rees, where he gives what I thought was a very good definition of the job of the CEO of a company. He said, the job of the CEO is to find the future in the current activities. So what are the fundamental current activities of Bajaj or Wipro or any company? I think there are two things. They are the skills we possess and the cost structure we have. So once again, it goes back to the story of the transition of Bajaj I was telling you about. How do you take the skills and cost structure you have, the people and products you have, the brands and the culture you have, and take them forward and adapt as the outside world changes? You know, so my job, as I saw it, when I look back now over the last 34 years I've been at Bajaj, has been to take it from being a scooter company to a motorcycle company to a global company to an EV company. So my job has been to keep finding the future in the existing activities of the company. But in this, one thing is very, very important, and it is a word that is called alignment. You know, if you read the book of the famous director Quentin Tarantino, apparently, I haven't read it, but apparently someone told me at the end of a very nice book, he says, if 60 years of making films has taught me one thing, it is this: we will all make a great film only if we are all making the same film. So when you go through this transition, you know, if somebody wants to make a big motorcycle, somebody wants to make a small one, somebody wants to make an expensive one, somebody wants to make a cheap one, somebody wants to make a cute one, somebody wants to make a sporty one, we will never make a great motorcycle. So how you help your company and your team adapt in a manner that everybody is aligned, as Guruji P.K.S. Iyengar, my yoga guru, used to say, that yoga is alignment of one foot with the other, the hand with the leg, all of your body with your mind, and your mind with the higher place in the, in the universe. So in the same way, the job of the CEO, I think, is to keep everybody aligned to a higher purpose as you adapt and take yourself forward into the future. That's how I see my job.
You know, Rajiv, today, the automobile industry, and same for Wipro, the IT industry is going through a lot of disruptions. AI is the biggest disruption, and in EVs, the technology is a major issue. Nobody knows where we will finally go. You've often said that this is a moment of reckoning for the automobile industry. The battle is between the established mainstream auto players and how they embrace the new technology, and the startups, or upstarts, as you call them. So who's winning, and what's going to define who wins this battle? And who lasts for the next 75 years?
So there are three terminologies here. There is startup, then there is a word which I like to call most of them, which is upstart, and then us, the winners or the champions, right? So,
all right, that is an interesting conversation. We'll come